Hello beautiful people, welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to learn something super important. We are going to integrate the Firebase authentication, meaning sign in, sign up and sign out, using provider for managing our states. If you are following my e-commerce tutorials, you already know this UI because we're using that on these e-commerce tutorials. But if this is the first video you're seeing on my channel, you can still follow this particular video even though you're not following the e-commerce tutorial. For the e-commerce followers, I removed all of the code from this page, and if you remember, this is the login page, this is the sign up page. I removed all of the code related to Firebase authentication from the sign in and sign up page, and the code remaining is only the UI, is the code that provides us this structure here and for the sign up as well. So the code here is only related to the UI. Okay, this is the code. I won't explain this because I've built this live. I have videos of this. If you want to check how we got into here, you can go back to my previous videos. If you're only interested in knowing how can you work with Flutter, Firebase authentication and provider, you can just continue from here. Okay, with that being said, I would like first to give a big props to this guy, the owner of this article, because that's a very good article, and I actually went ahead and read this particular article. So I would recommend you guys to go ahead and read this, because most of the work here I did based on the knowledge on this particular article, and I'll try to leave the link in the description. With that said, let's go and start working with our provider package. The very first thing you'll want to do, you can just do this, and now we can just write here Flutter provider. That's it. You just come here, you open up, and we are going installing, and that's that. Let's go back to our project, and we will open our pubspec file, and I'll put this on full screen for now because we don't need to be seeing the emulator as well. And we are going to put here a provider package and hit on get packages. We already have a basic video for beginners about providers, and if you did not see that one, I recommend you to go back to that particular video, because there I give you the basic knowledge you must have to understand this particular one. Okay, perfect. With this out of the way, how are we going to structure this? It's going to be like that. We're going to our library, we are going to create a new Dart file. Since our provider deals with our business logic, you can leave it like that. Or to be easier, you can just write provider, so that actually let me delete this because we don't want to have any naming conflicts. So what are we going to do here? Okay, we'll create a Dart file. We are going to call this file provider. We are going to call this folder provider, and the file we're going to call it user provider. Okay, I have a lot of files open here, so let me go ahead and close these ones. Perfect. Now we can start working with our provider. the very first package we'll want to import here is our flutter material.dart, and we want to import flutter widgets. Let me just move my, okay, perfect. And then what we're going to do, we are going to create a enum that's going to take care of the current status of the user. Status. So we are going to, one second, okay, perfect. We are going to create different status for the user, and we can write here an initialize and then we're going to create another status. A user can be initialized, user can be authenticated, it can be authenticating, and can be unauthenticated. Okay, so what's going to be the use of this? The user can only be in one of these states. Uninitialized means the user just opening the app, so we are having the splash screen. When the user is unauthenticated, we are going to put him on the login screen because he needs authentication. When the process is going on, the authentication process, we are going to need the circular progress indicator. And when the user is authenticated, the user will be logged into the app. This is a very good structure to follow, and I think it's perfect. So let's create a class, and we're going to call this user provider with change notifier, and I already explained you guys why we do this on our previous video. We need here we need to import Firebase Auth because we're going to be dealing with authentication and all. So in here we are going to create Firebase Auth and we're going to want a Firebase user, and we're going to call him user as well. And finally we are going to create a variable status that's going to keep the status of the user. And when this object when a particular object of this class is created, we want the status to be unauthenticated, uninitialized. Okay, this is going to be the first status of the user, uninitialized. We're going to create a named constructor. We're going to call this initialize, and then for this constructor we want our auth for authentication. It's going to be Firebase authentication instance, and in here we want auth on state change. This is going just to be listening to the state of the user. So when the state changes from initialized or authenticated, we want to be listening. And if you saw the videos about the block pattern, I gave you guys a brief introduction about streams. So now here we are subscribing to a particular stream because the way Firebase gives information it gives us streams, and we are subscribing to a particular stream, and we are listening to that particular stream, and we are going to create a method called unchanged. On status changed, you can do that. So every time the status of the user is changed, this method is going to be called. The state is changed, so let's call it state. Okay, perfect. From now, we want to create this method, but still we will define the body of this method afterwards, not now. Don't want to worry with that now. Okay, continuing our class, we want to create a getter for our status that will enable us to get the particular status of the user, and we want to be able to get the user. So we're going to create another getter called user that's going to give us access to this private user. Okay, perfect. This is done. Let me organize stuff in the correct position. So put that there, and now put this here. Okay, perfect. Now let's create a method, and it's going to be a boolean, and this method is going to deal with our sign in, and now we are only worrying about the email sign in, and we are going to be dealing with the Google one afterwards. Okay, perfect. For our sign in, we're going to be taking a string email, and we're going to be taking another string password. We want it to be async method. Perfect. We will put a try and catch block in here. Okay, the very first thing we are going to do is changing the status of our user. So when we try to sign in, the first thing we want to do is to make sure that the status of the user is going to change to authenticating. Okay, this is the first point. And then notify listeners, and as we know, this is just going to notify to our listeners that something changed inside of this provider. That's the very first step. And after our listeners are notified, we are going to be actually doing the sign in with email and password, and we're going to provide email here for the email and password for the password. And if everything runs right here, we're going to want to return true, meaning the execution was perfect. In case of an error, unauthenticated is what we want to print, or is what we want to show, and then we'll notify. We can do a print here to string so we can see the error in case we have any, and finally we want to return false. Simple thing here at the beginning, just changing the state to authenticating, and we're going to notify listeners, and then we're going to perform the email sign in with the sign in with email and password, and that's all. Then return true. That's all we have to do. And since we're here, we can go ahead and define all of the methods we're going to use. Maybe we can change the rest afterwards. Another method, in fact, I don't want to write this over again, so because they're very similar in terms of structure. So we're going to copy and paste and do a sign up. But for the sign up, we're going to want to have the username as well. So we may need to ask for that name. Okay, in here this is perfect. And then here we want a sign in with email. No, we don't want to sign, we want to create an account actually with email and password. And then we are going to get a user from this Firebase user, and inside of that, let's take a second to see how our user user ID, and the rest is up to us. Okay, perfect. Let's go back here. We're going to create a map, and we're going to define this map as being a map of a string and a dynamic. Okay, and inside of this we are going to define the name of the user, and this is going to be equal to name. We're going to define the email of the user, and that's going to be equal to email. And finally we are going to define the user ID. User ID, and it's going to be equal to user.uuid. Okay, that's all. The very last thing we want to do here is come to our user services, because we need to define this in here. Let's import it. So here for the sign up, what are we going to do is, at the end we're going to create user services, create user, and we're going to pass values in here. And if we go to create user file to check how this works, this is basically a small class I created. We have here Firebase, we have Firestore instance, and we're creating a small collection of the type of the name users, and this is all that we need. Okay, that's that. Okay, with that part done, let's continue with our coding. We are going to create another feature, and this is going to be responsible for the sign out of the users. Auth.signout. We're going to change the status of this. Unauthenticated is the status, and then we're going to notify listeners of the change we did, and we're going to finish this with a return future delayed for actually you don't need to write this line here, you can just return a future. But since future work asynchronously, here you can define the duration that these must take to return this particular value. That's what they use the return feature with the duration. Okay, with that out of the way, we can continue coding. And as a matter of fact, let us start working with this method on state changed. Let's make it a future. It can be void, but it has to be made a future. And let's make this asynchronous as well. So we have here the events. We can change the name of that to user. That's actually the event. So if the user is null, meaning that we don't have any Firebase user logged in at least, we're going to put here our status to unauthenticated, or else our private user here is going to be equal to this Firebase user. And finally, we're going to change our status to status.authenticated. So we will be listening here when we initialize here. We'll be listening to this stream on state changed, and when this state changed, we're going to check if we get a Firebase user has null. We're going to continue authenticated, and if we have a Firebase user which is not null, we're going to change this the status to authenticated. Okay, and of course for any changes done, we want to then notify listeners. Okay, so for this part of the work, everything is done. Let's continue. Let's work with the main now. Let's work with the main. First of all, we will want to import the provider package. Done. The very first part is done. And here we have our material app. What I'm going to do here is remove this material app for now, and for the run, the very first thing we're going to put here is our change notifier provider. Of course, we need a builder, and our builder is going to be we may need to import something else for our user provider. Can I import it already? No. Okay, let me do small. Let me import our user provider. Initialize. That's that. And then after this, we want to define a child, and inside of the child now we can return our material app, no problem. And another thing I would like to change here is I'll create a stateless my app. Oh, I can just call it screens controller. And what I'm going to do here is for the home I'll call screens controller. And what screens controller will do is basically return a screen or particular page, a particular screen based on the status of the user. Okay. And for now, here on our pages, I can go and create a file. As a matter of fact, I'll create it down here and then we'll change. Let's create another stateless. I'm going to call it splash. And it's going to work as our splash screen. For now, let's just put a circular progress indicator. That's all. But no, anyways, I think we better do that. Here on our pages. Call this splash. Done. Go back to the main. Copy this. So copy the splash screen there. We'll put it here. Of course, we'll need to import. We'll need to import our flutter material.dart. That's all for our splash screen. Done. Okay, so I won't explain what it's happening here with the change notifier, because for the beginners video I touched this particular concept, so I hope you guys understand. And if you're not understanding, go back and check that video and then come to this particular video. Okay, perfect. Now what are we going to do here is right in here down here, we'll create a final. I'm going to call it user provider of context user provider is what we want. So what we're doing here is basically defining the type for our particular provider. User is the type user provider, but that's something you guys know already, hopefully. Now here we're going to use a switch statement, And for our case, we'll be analyzing our user dot status of the user, and here we can have a couple cases. First, we'll start with what happened with our status dot initialized, and when this particular thing happens, we want to return splash. Another case we want to check here, we can check our unauthenticated status. Yes, unauthenticated status. And it's going to be the same case for our status authenticating. We can just return or login. Okay, and then finally, of course, our final case status is when the user is authenticated and we want to return our home page. We can just do this and import our home page, and for the default I can just put return the login screen. And ladies and gentlemen, for this particular part, this is how our main file will be structured now. Okay, we have our screens controller, as I told you, that is going to manage our screens and the screen that it's going to be returned. And I don't know if you guys can already feel how practical is this, but if you're not, just wait. Now let's see how can we make this work in terms of code. Of course, we will need to, first of all, I can delete all of this. We'll need to import, probably we'll need to go back and then provider and then user provider. Okay, perfect, that's all. For our initial state, we don't need nothing, so we can just erase that. And our work, it's going to start from let's create a final key. This is going to be our scaffold. State key, and right inside our scaffold we can provide our keep property as being key. Okay, that's perfect. Let's go back to our main. Close it in here. Let's go back to our main. Let's just copy this particular line because I don't want to write it again. We don't have provider, so we better import the package. And while we're still here, let's go to our sign up page and do the exactly same thing. I have problems with the provider. Import packages, and for the user provider as well, import packages. Okay, and if I go back here, we need this key for and then we're going to use the value of this particular key for this scaffold. Okay, now we're not worried about gender or the value of this, so I can just erase that and go at the very bottom here on value change. We don't need this anymore. Okay, let's start by configuring our login, and we want to work with this exactly on here. Okay, we have our method here, validate, which doesn't exist, so we're going to create this method which we want to be asynchronous, of course. And inside our method, we're going to check if our form key current state validates. So we want to check if our form is valid, and then if, zoom it a bit, we want to await our user okay, we cannot do this outside because of this reason. We have our user there, so the best approach here is coming directly on the on press. Why did I change? Because I want to make use of this user here, but this is defined inside of the build, and outside of the build I cannot access that. Anyways, async method, and I'm going to call this user sign in, mail text controller, but these names are very long. I don't know why I like doing this. So here I'll just put email, and here I'll just put password. The best thing to do is renaming, not just changing. So I'll go refactor, rename. Or I think we can do this with F6, shift F6. Okay, perfect. Now we can go back down here and just write email.text and password.text. Okay. I think that here that's all we want from this particular part. And for our key, we want to make use of our current state, and remember that this key is the key of our scaffold, so it gives access to our scaffold. So on our scaffold, we want to show a snack bar. And the content of the snack bar we want to show is this is going to be shown in case the login or the sign in is not correctly. We will write sign in failed. Okay, that's what we have to do. Let me just copy this and I'll paste it on our sign up screen right here. Again, I'll have to rename this fields. Shift F6, mail, Shift F6, password, Shift F6, name. Done. But now we want to change something else. And what are we doing here, just to explain to you guys, because it seems like I forgot. We are checking if our sign in is not true. If this is false, meaning that something failed, we're going to display this text, this snack bar, saying that sign in failed, and here would be sign up failed. And here we want to change this method from sign in to sign up. Of course, we need another thing here, which is name dot text. And if you see the magic, that's all. That's all we have to do on our UI. Now we're making use of a provider, and we are completely separating the business logic of the app from the UI, because the UI here doesn't worry about nothing, doesn't manage any state, doesn't do nothing. Okay. Another thing we would want to do here, let's see if we have a comments. Okay, we do have one. Components. Okay, I think I'll have to create this. Let us create on comments. Let us create Dart file, and I'm going to call this loading. It's going to be a stateless widget. I'm going to call this loading. and this is just to make sure we don't have to write circular progress indicator every time. We can just call this widget. So just provide the center, and the child of our center is going to be circular progress indicator. That's all we want. And going back to our sign up, we will want to check what's the state of the user. So that would be user, oops. So if the user status is equal to status authenticating, we will want to, if that's true, we will display loading. If that's not true, we'll display our stack. That's that. Let's go back to our login and try to make this work as well. Same old thing. If the status of the user is equal to authenticating, we're going to display this loading, while also going to display this tab. And this was it, guys. This was it. Now it's time to test the code. We wrote a lot of code, but we did set up our business logic, our provider, and then we're managing the states there, and the UI is just a reflection. Okay, let's do a test to see whether it did work or not. Okay, I hope it works, because if it doesn't, I'm probably going to sleep. It's almost 5 a.m. now and I'm still up making videos for you guys. This is how much I love you. Okay, let's let it process a bit. And this is working for this part, because if you are able to see our login screen, means that the thing is working for now. The first part. Let's try to create a user to see if that's going to work as well. Test 3 or 4, I don't know which test is this. Test 4 .com 1 2 3 1 2 3 sign up. Okay, we have our user probably signed up, but it wasn't supposed to come back here. Okay, when I restart the app, it changes. So we will fix how that thing works on our next video. I will fix that particular part. Okay, or maybe the issue was to make sure we finish this video properly, where the issue was, or why didn't it change without me having to do that. But okay, we'll have a look into that shortly. But now let's see if we can go and implement our sign out now. log out. That's it. And instead, and you see how we used to do this? Let's try to just go to our login or sign up. Copy this line of code, go back to home, and from home we're going to paste it. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the power and the magic of using provider to manage our states. This is just magic. And here at the very bottom, you can just do user dot sign out. Let's see if it works. And it does work. So I had a small error here, I still have to check that. Let's see if the login works as well. Testful at test.com, and then we have 1 2 3 1 2 3. And it does work as well perfectly. Let's try to do a sign out and give maybe wrong credentials. What about that? And see if this is being handled or not. Sign in failed. Perfect. That's perfect. You can have here sign in failed, just like that. So guys, this was the complete structure for the sign up and sign in. Even though for the sign up we still have to do a small modification on this method, I think. But we still have to do a small modification here to see what's wrong. Why didn't we have that changed automatically? But we're going to change to see that on our next video. For now, that's all guys. I hope you did enjoy this video and if you did, leave a like, leave a comment. See you on the next one.